I think about 100 or so, but they sold out very quickly, and they're currently on back order. So for those of you who didn't get your scarf this year, I'm told that we're going to have them again. But it was a really nice way to unify our look for the day on the Hill. Next slide. So we did try a different agenda this year, and we stayed on schedule for most of the day, but we had to have some flexibility to accommodate those representatives that were able to join us. If you were there, you realized that we did our best to, accommodate when the representatives did show up. And I want to send a special thank you to the three representatives that did come to talk to us in person. That is Representative Lauren Underwood, Representative Lisa Blunt, and Representative Edie Bernice Johnson, who most of you should know was the first nurse ever elected to Congress. And Representative Underwood, as you all should also know, is the most recent nurse elected to Congress and the youngest Black woman ever elected to Congress. We did our symbolic march up to the Hill again because that's what we were told people were really interested in, and it was a really good hit. It was recorded. I'm sure that recording, once it's edited, is going to be available. We did a reception and a debriefing session after. The reaction and the feedback that we got back was people liked the flow of the day. The special reactions panel, which was made up of NBNA members, was received very well. The members liked the time and the ability to be able to give reflections today. We do recognize that when we ended the day, somebody's getting feedback, so somebody needs to mute their phone. There was a slight gap in time between when we ended and when we set up for the reception, but that was partly due to the hotel needing to flip the room for the reception. But we're always going to be able to look at what we've done to see how we can improve it. So thank you all who also gave us feedback on the day. Next slide. I'm going to go through just some pictures. One of the things that happened was good timing, in that most of the representatives were actually physically present because of the timing of when the shutdown ended, and they were actually in active session when we were there that day. This first picture, of course, is after our march up to the Hill, in which we assembled to take a group photo. Next slide. So this is one of what I was talking about. Our colleagues from Ohio got to actually meet with Senator Sherrod Brown. He is a long-term supporter and one of the senators that is very well known. And this picture was shared with us by our Cleveland Council of Black Nurses chapter. Next slide. This is a picture that I wish I was a part of, because several of our members, as you can see, co-opted Aunt Maxine and took a really nice picture with her as well. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, as you all know, is a very big supporter of nursing and nursing issues. Always a really good time to talk with her. So they were very excited when they got to chat with her for a little bit, and she was very gracious in being able to allow them to take a picture. Next slide. My chapter, the Greater New York City NBNA chapter, actually physically got to meet with Representative Hakeem Jeffries. He is the representative that is the fifth in line of the Democratic leadership. He represents a district out of Brooklyn. He's also an alumni of the same university as a couple of us in the chapter. The chapter also physically got to meet with the long-term running senator, senior Democratic leader, Senator Charles Schumer as well. Next slide. This is a picture of myself and Dr. Williams with Representative Edie Bernice Johnson, who again gave a really nice comment to all who were assembled. Next slide. Our colleagues from Atlanta, one of our board members, got to meet with the Representative John Lewis, who represents that district down in Georgia. You all know Representative Lewis is a long-term also supporter of health and healthcare issues and a civil rights hero. So they were very nice to share this picture with us as well. Next slide. This is Representative Lauren Underwood when she was giving her comments to us. And she brought her whole team. There was an article written by somebody on her team. And if you haven't seen the article, we included the link right here to the article, which talked about her agenda, which you all know when she stated her whole agenda while she's in Congress is all going to be about healthcare and healthcare issues. Next slide. So I'll turn this over to Dr. Phillips.
Okay, this next slide is important, just like the rest of the slides. And I cannot overestimate or overemphasize the value of staying connected and engaged on the local level. So here are some pointers on the slide. One, contact your local congressional office and become acquainted with your elected officials, you know, on the county level, whether they might be on the aldermanic level, city, state, or federal level. And you may recall Representative Underwood even mentioned, you know, and like in Illinois, we have someone who heads up our Cook County, and that person is very influential, so we don't want to underestimate the power, influence of our local legislators. Know their health agenda. All of their legislative officials have a web page, and they have their information in terms of bills that they are introducing, things that they are supporting. They may have a calendar of events or other things that might be pertinent to their respective districts. So from time to time, it's very important to peruse their websites, visit offices to get a good feel for where they stand on policy issues. Continue to share the NBNA's health policy agenda, but also be mindful to update the statistics as needed. Things change from month to month, so when we go before our lawmakers, we want to make sure we have the most current information possible. The local and state departments of health are a good place to start. The local data on issues that we are advocating for. Attending town hall meetings and invite your officials to attend your chapter meetings. I had the pleasure of attending a town hall meeting this fall, and the agenda was on how do we prepare our mayoral candidates with the health agenda, and I gave testimony about the importance of environmental justice. There was a final document that was put together. My quotes as well as my thoughts were included, and they were presented to our mayoral candidates. And you probably know the news by now. We are very well positioned. We will have, first time in Chicago, a black female mayor, and we're all excited about it. Familiarize yourself with your state legislative, those elected officials, and stay on top of polls and what's being enacted. For example, in Illinois, you'll see our website here to stay abreast of what's happening, but every state has a website, and so it's important that you visit that from time to time. And then on the federal level, there's also the www.govtrack.us, which will give us updates on what's happening on the federal level. So again, staying connected and engaged is extremely important. Hill Day is once a year, but there are other things that go on the rest of the year. We want to make sure that we are actively engaged, also that people know who we are.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So we're going to go and review the 5 legislative toolkit items and give some brief updates. So next slide. The maternal mortality issue, which NBNA has long been a supporter of, and it's really all about how we need to be mindful about doing what we can to reduce the rates of maternal mortality and its devastating effects, which are disproportionate in people of color communities. We were talking about Maternal Care Act S3363. But since then, there's been some movement in this area, and there was another bill that we want you to be aware of. Next slide. The Mothers and Offspring Mortality and Morbidity Awareness Act, or the MOMS Act. Senator Durbin and Representative Robin Kelly from Illinois will be reintroducing this piece of legislation called the MAMA Act. And it is to reduce maternal and infant morbidity and mortality rates, especially among women and babies of color. They're requesting $5 million in fiscal years 2019 through 2023. This is one that we need to keep an eye on. NBNA got a request to sign on to support a letter to support this legislation, and I believe that we did agree to do so. But this is an important piece of legislation that we're also going to be monitoring for you all, but we wanted to make you aware of it. Because as you all know, we started a new Congress in January, so a lot of bills are being reintroduced and a lot of things are changing quickly. And some of the things we talked about, the bills we talked about before, either going to have to be reintroduced or different versions of them have been introduced. Next slide. The climate change and environmental justice issue. At the time when we were on the Hill, there was not a particular piece of legislation that we were advocating for. What our issue was really just to endorse those actions related to climate change and to make people aware of what was going on. And we encourage people to use their local data to talk with their representatives about some of the environmental changes going on locally. But there was a focus on and support for the Clean Air Act Authority and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which seems to be under attack from this current administration. Now, next slide. What did happen, and what happened on the same day that we were there, if you're not aware of, if you've not heard of the Green New Deal, this is a very broad resolution that was introduced on February 7th, 2019 by Representative Alexander Ocasio-Cortez from New York and Senator Ed Merkley from Massachusetts. This resolution already has 67 co-sponsors. So one of the things that you need to be mindful of is asking your local representative, are they a co-sign or co-sponsor of the Green New Deal resolution? And you can see there's a list of things here that this is hoping to cover. Things like meeting all of our power demands through renewable energy resources, repair and upgrade existing buildings and infrastructure, to lower emissions. Nina?
All good.
Sorry, you fixed it. Okay, there we go.
Sorry,
To work. That's okay. To work with farmers and ranchers to improve sustainability in agriculture by supporting family farming, increasing soil health, and creating food systems that ensure universal access to healthy foods. Next slide. This continues with things like preserving land, planting trees, and use of other proven low-tech solutions that increase soil carbon storage, thus helping to pull the CO2 from the atmosphere, restore and protect threatened and endangered and fragile ecosystems. This is really sort of setting the agenda and trying to push this whole issue of what climate change is doing to our society. So what can you do in terms of following up on this? Again, I think the main thing here, you need to check to see if your representatives are sponsors. And if not, you need to talk with them about why they should. Find local data on climate change issues in your area to share with your representatives, because that makes it more meaningful. And look into the various environmental coalitions that are organizing to support the Green New Deal. Next slide. Dr. Phillips?
This slide here provides us a brief snapshot of the Health Equity and Accountability Act, which has both House and Senate support, H.R. 592 and Senate Bill 3660. This is a piece of proposal that has a number of provisions put around addressing health equity and reducing health disparities. And as you can see, it's a broadly supported legislative initiative, meaning that it has lots of provisions, and there's quite a bit of support in Congress for this piece of legislation. The interesting thing about this is that when we were on Capitol Hill, we were advocating for this, and I'm going to move on to the next slide because I need to follow up on what happened to this. Well, this was first introduced in May of 2018. The last action that was reported on this proposed legislation was October of 2018 when it was referred to the Subcommittee on Health, Employment, Labor, and Pension. That meaning that this was not passed during our last congressional session. It will need to be reintroduced during this or any subsequent congressional session, and so we should continue to watch as this gets reintroduced periodically. This has a long-standing history of being introduced throughout the years, and so I would not be surprised if it would not be reintroduced by some of our congressional representatives. Hispanic Coalition and African American Coalition, the other minority focused coalitions are co-sponsors of this, and even though it didn't get anywhere this last session, we're in a new session now, maybe it might get some traction moving forward. But this is a very important piece to continue to monitor.
Okay, next slide. So one of the main issues that is longstanding with NBNA is the issue of gun violence and related consequences, which, again, disproportionately affects people of color communities. So when we were there, we were talking about the Gun Violence Research Act, H.R. 1478. Well, it didn't pass in the last congressional session, but next slide. What has happened since then, and I want to bring your attention to a few things. One, this issue of gun violence came back into the forefront with the March 15th, 2019 mass shooting at two mosques in New Zealand. It killed, that day, 50 people got killed and 50 people were injured. They did apprehend the assailant, who was described as a white supremacist, part of the alt-right. But more importantly, what New Zealand has quickly moved to do behind this latest unfortunate mass shooting was a move to very quickly ban assault weapons in their country. Representative Clyburn has introduced H.R. 1112 to the bill Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2019. And this bill is calling to amend Chapter 44 of the Title 18 United States Code to strengthen background check procedures for before and after any federal firearms and licenses are transferred. What happened with this bill, it was introduced and it actually passed the House on February the 28th, and it now has been sent to the Senate for its consideration. I bring this to your attention because this bill has a strong possibility of passing the Senate because of, again, all of the recent activity around gun violence. And it really is just calling for, common sense background checks. So, again, if your senator is not indicated with what their position is on this particular bill, I'll get the Senate version and we'll send it out because once it's signed, once over to the Senate, it should get a Senate number as well. But when it comes up for vote, you need to know where your senator stands on this particular piece of legislation. Next slide. The last issue that we advocated for was combating the opioid epidemic issue. And this was a follow-up on the SUPPORT Act, which was already passed by the 115th Congress, the last Congress, and signed into law by the current administration. Now, so what we were really advocating for here was that there was many provisions and programs that the SUPPORT Act was supposed to do. Supposed to be resources, money allocated in the current fiscal year budget for the Department of Health and Human Services to enact the law. Because, there is one thing to pass a piece of legislation and to propose to set up certain programs. If what happens next doesn't happen, which is the appropriation of resources and money to actually enact it, then nothing actually gets done. One of the things that we were also calling for was some resources for the National Institute for Nursing Research to be able to do research in and around the opioid addiction. Next slide. So what you have to be mindful of, if you're not familiar with everything or every provision of the SUPPORT Act, we've given you a slide, a link here to the Kaiser Family Foundation that does really good policy briefs. And they really break down everything that's in the SUPPORT Act, so you can take a look at that. But I want to just bring your attention to the fact that we now need to watch the appropriations for this bill. The fiscal year 2019 budget can be found at that particular link. And there is money in the HHS budget to begin to fund this. However, in the next proposed budget, the 2020, there is going to be a 12% cut, a proposed cut to HHS. So it would potentially drop its discretionary funding and potentially impact what is going to happen with the implementation of the SUPPORT Act. So you have to know what's happening in your state. One of the provisions of the SUPPORT Act required state Medicaid programs to cover certain medications, treatment, and all FDA-approved drugs and counseling services. So you have to follow up at your state level to find out whether or not your state is following through with these provisions as well. All right? Next slide.
This slide that highlights some additional resources. Again, the site for tracking legislative bills, www.govtrack.us. This next entry, the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. This is an entity that analyzes the federal budget, and it would be a nice thing to kind of familiarize yourself with this, particularly when the new budget comes out. There are some detailed analysis of what's being cut and what are the implications there. The next entry is about where you can get more information regarding the opioid epidemic. And then finally, communicating with your legislative official by email, phone, and in person. This next two entries are linkages to how you might be able to establish communicate with your elected official. Next slide, please. Again, this is incredibly important to all of us. The slide is entitled, Take the Message Home and Follow Up. So this is a slide that just shows a number of things that all of us are encouraged to do. Particularly after the Hill Day, we became very familiar with our policy agenda. And so we need to stay in contact with those that we know on the Hill via email and listserv. Again, make it a plan to follow up and visit local elected officials when they come home on recess, on break. Invite them to your chapter meetings. Continue to share the toolkit with our officials and continue to advocate for our legislative tool issues. If you have not done so yet, send a note of thanks to whoever you saw at the office that you're in. Don't underestimate that. I know sometimes we are excited to see our members, but in the event that members were not available, simply to send a follow-up thank you note to staff to whoever we met with. Volunteer to serve as content expert on a health-related matter, particularly those things that are important in your district. Make it a point to educate your representatives, elevate issues in your neighbors, and keep your representatives accountable. You might recall when Representative Underwood spoke with us, she talked about her desire to, and she had gone to a town hall meeting, and her local representative gone back on his terms of supporting aspects of the Affordable Care Act, particularly the provision around pre-existing conditions. And so because she did not agree like he had promised, it really ignited her fire even more. And that was a strong impetus for her to run for his seat and won. Next slide. This next slide just talks about our next event, February the year 2020. It will be at the same location, the Washington Hotel. Very convenient to the Hill. We want to stay there because we know that we can march into the Hill, very located and very easy for us to access. Time is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. and as always, we will be wearing our red. So it's never too early to plan to attend. Getting your time off from work, saving your travel there. We're planning these activities even as we speak. Next slide. This is an acknowledgement slide. Sheldon and I, and all of the members are eternally grateful to all of the members who attended, all of the students who are represented. We know that, as they say, it takes a village. All of these individuals you see on this slide were actively involved in trying to produce the best program possible for those who attend. So a big thanks goes out to each and every one of them and each and every one of you for not only attending Hill Day, but being available tonight on our webinar.
All right. So there was a question about the slides being made available, and as you can see, we will definitely make the slides available. The webinar was being recorded, and will be made available to the membership as well. But at this time, we are more than happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And you can type your questions into the chat.
Don't be shy. Colleen said that there was some issues with the sound. I think that's what it said.
Yeah, it was going out a little bit.
Someone is asking for information to be appointed to the Health Policy Committee.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that up on the screen. They want to know about joining the Health Policy Committee.
Anybody who wants to join the Health Policy Committee can send me a note of their desire. The positions on the Health Policy Committee are approved by the president. We could always use extra hands on the Health Committee. The hashtag that we used that day, hashtag NBNA HD 20, I think it was. If you put that into your Facebook search and whatnot, you'll be able to pull up the rest of the pictures and stuff for that day. But we did have an official photographer. Pictures were taken. Many more will come out. Wow.
Hi, just to add to that, if you go on our website, www.nbna.org, every single event that we do has pictures up on our Smug Mug account, and that's connected to our website. So if you want to see pictures of the day, you can go there, and you can also purchase them there.
Thank you, Nina. Appreciate that. There was a question, and we'll go back up here. Asha asked a question, I missed it.
Someone asked about, I think they wanted some information on violence because they're doing a luncheon. I can't see the questions are popping up and then they're very quickly, but I think the last question has to do with the luncheon that one of the chapters is and I think they will ask.
If you want, I can see them.
Okay, what was the last question? Violence and.
So one question from Sasha, will appointments be the same time next year so people can make appointments early?
Yes. Well, the issue though becomes, Sasha, that, we have elections and then you have a quick turnover. Folks are just getting established when they come back after the holiday. So we recommend that people make those appointments as early as they can when they know that Congress is back in session.
Okay, next question. V. Singleton is asking, their annual scholarship luncheon theme will be on issues of gun violence. Can you give a recommendation on what would be a beneficial thing to focus on for a panel discussion to raise awareness?
So I think being aware of your local data again to make it more salient, find out what the gun violence rates are in your area, and again, this whole the latest bill, the 1112 bill that I talked about from Representative Clyburn, I think you really have to discuss and look at the bill and have a brief discussion about whether or not the provisions are something that would be useful in your community, and whether or not the bill goes far enough. And what is necessary, what is needed in your community, because this only talks about background checks. There's been a call on and off for the banning of assault weapons to begin with. And then, and what's always very powerful, you might want to think about, uh, is personal accounts. For those of you who are or who were with us on Hill Day, there were some people who shared with us some very personal experiences with gun violence, including one of our colleagues in Miami who was robbed in her own driveway and had a gun put to her head. These types of things are very real. A panel where people talk about their experiences is always something that helps to move the discussion.
Okay, one more question here. Do you see advocacy issues changing or additional ones?
Janice?
That could depend on what's really happening. If there's something everything is very important. Sometimes it's very, very hard to decide what the agenda might be, but we know that there are some things that continue to plague our community. For example, we've been talking about gun violence for the last couple of years because we really haven't solved that issue. So that's a pressing issue that could possibly be addressed next year. And then there are new and emerging things that come up, like we've turned our attention to maternal mortality because we know that there's a lot of movement, a lot of action, and a lot more information about what's happening to women in our communities. So we don't want to say that it's definitely prescriptive, but it depends on what's going on as we get closer to the time. But one thing that you can count on is that the issues that we select are issues that are very important that have been plaguing our community. So we try to develop an agenda around health disparities and around issues that might help to achieve health equity.
Right. The basis of a lot of what we do in the legislative items have to be in alignment with the NBNA overall mission, because this is the NBNA's Day on the Hill. So it is really around health equity, health, social justice. Hence the whole issue this year with the climate change bill. And sometimes you can also, there's the official legislative agenda of NBNA, but as we have said to you all several times, if there is a local issue that is plaguing your community, if you want to come to the Hill and talk to your representatives, you can do that. But you have to be very clear in what it is you're talking about. And again, Hill Day is one day where we go to Washington, D.C. Do not let the time when your representatives come back to your local districts, which is sometimes usually over the summer, make an appointment and go see them in their local district offices. You'd be surprised the impact you can have with that level of follow-up. And commit as a chapter to go. Either go as a chapter to their office or, as Janice said, invite them to your meeting. See if someone from their office will show up. You'd be surprised. I think people are afraid to approach their representatives. Remember I mentioned there were several students that was with us, and one of the students even said at the end of the day how nervous that she was, but then realizing how easy it was to actually get in to talk with their representatives. Because at the end of the day, this is their job.
Yes, it is. They're there to represent us and to address our issues and the issues of their district. So they're there to serve,
Okay. Other questions or thoughts? I see that the folks are planning to have someone from law enforcement. Yes, absolutely. sounds like a good agenda.
Mhm.
So, any other questions, colleagues? Okay, Trilby, you can go back to work. Okay, well, it's 8:50. And as I said, the webinar will be made available, so will the slides. On behalf of the Health Policy Committee and the Committee for your Hill Day 2019, I want to thank you for your time and attention this evening. We hope, just as the pre-webinar was helpful for preparing you, that the post-webinar will have done the same. And if these webinars are truly helpful, we can plan to do them on some type of a regular basis. But we will be following up, and we will be sending out some messages in the NBNA newsletter about some of the legislative items as we know them to come up. So on that note, everybody have a great evening, and
Thank you so much. Thanks, Nina. Thanks, everybody.
absolutely, thank you, Nina.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.